is up to half the kingdom, I will give it to you. That's king talk for what do you want? I'm in a good mood today. It's kind of like when us men say, would you like to be in charge of the remote control tonight? I've had a good day, Steve. So Esther says, hey, I'm having a party and I'd like for you and Haman to come. The king has never turned down a party in his life, so they come. And they have a great time. And the king says the second time, Esther, what do you want? Even up to half the kingdom, it's yours. And Esther says, if the king regards me with favor, if the king wishes to grant my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet I shall prepare tomorrow, and I will then answer the king's request. Esther is showing us how brilliant she is here. Because the king, by agreeing to come, has almost already agreed to her request. And we're ready now for the climax of the story, but the author is smart, and he leaves us in suspense here for a moment, and he switches back to this man named Haman. Now, Haman's feeling pretty good about his life right now. He's just had dinner with the king and queen, and so he goes home, and he gathers his family around him, and they pat him on the back and tell him how wonderful he is. But then Haman thinks about Mordecai, and his good mood just goes right out the window. And he says, all of this does me no good as long as I have to see that Mordecai sitting at the gate. You see, Haman also had a shadow mission. And I mention this one in particular because many people suffer from the same shadow mission Haman had. It's called more. More wealth, more power, more applause, more status, more honor, more. And Haman goes through his life thinking, if I could just get more, hey, one day I know that it will be enough. Listen, one indicator that we are on a shadow mission is a chronic sense of soul dissatisfaction, because shadows can never satisfy the soul.
Amen.
Shadow missions bring bursts of gratification every once in a while, but it never brings deep contentment. People who live for more discover it never brings contentment. Now, Haman has a bad case of soul dissatisfaction. And of course, his compliant family feeds his shadow mission, especially his wife. And she comes up with this idea. She says, hey, why don't you build some gallows, about 75 feet high, and have Mordecai hanged on it? Nice wife. Meanwhile, that same night, the king can't sleep, so he asked his servants to read him a book called The Annals of the King. Guess who it's about? They say, oh king, what do you want us to read to you about? And he says, let's read that book about me. And so they do. And as they are reading, they read a story about a time that Mordecai saved the king's life from an assassination plot. And the king realizes that Mordecai's never been honored. He's never been thanked. And so the next day, when Haman arrives at the king's palace, the king immediately asks him, hey, Haman, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Of course, Haman thinks the king is talking about him, so he says, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden on, one with a royal crown placed on its head. A horse with a crown, picture that. Let one of the king's most noble princes lead the horse through the street proclaiming, thus it shall be done for the man the king delights to honor. And Haman is thinking, and we all know who that is. You know? Now imagine this moment. Man. The king says, yeah, that's a good idea. All right, the man to honor is Mordecai. Haman, you pull the horse. Great idea, buddy. And things start going downhill very quickly for Haman. Esther throws another banquet and tells the king that she and her people are about to be destroyed. And the king says, who? And Esther points to Haman and says, by a foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. And Haman ends up being hung on the very gallows that were built for Mordecai. And Esther reminds the king that the edict still stands against her and her people, and the king invites Esther to write a new state policy. And the ring that has been given to Haman goes instead to Mordecai. And Mordecai becomes the new chief of state, and Israel becomes so favored, we're told at the end of the book, that many nationalities committed themselves to the God of Israel, all because one man was willing to name reality. One man was willing to speak the truth. One man was engaged enough in Esther's life to say, who knows, but you have come to your position for such a time as this. And because a woman said no to a shadow mission of safety and security, and yes to following God in a mission worth dying for. If I perish, I perish. And now, it's our day. You are where you are. You have been given what you have been given for a reason. It may not be as dramatic as Esther and Mordecai, or as Xerxes and Haman, but my friend, it is eternal. And it matters in the cosmic balance. It matters in the grand scheme of things. That's why we need to come to grips with our shadow mission. As believers, Jesus is our model in all things, including overcoming our shadow mission. The scriptures say that Jesus became like us and was tempted like us in every way, but without sin. I think the shadow mission for Jesus was to be the leader without suffering. To be the Messiah without a cross. F. Bruce, a New Testament scholar, said that time and time again, the temptation came to Jesus in various ways to choose a less costly way of fulfilling his calling than the way of suffering and death. Think about it. In the desert, Satan tempts him to accomplish his mission without hunger. Hey, Jesus, turn these stones to bread. You don't need to be hungry, Jesus. Without pain. Hey, Jesus, throw yourself down from the temple. Hey, the angels, they'll catch you. Without opposition, bow down before me and all the kingdoms of the earth will be yours. You don't have to be hungry, Jesus. You don't have to suffer pain, Jesus. You don't have to be opposed, Jesus. Even when he's hanging on the cross and people mock him and say, look at him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. If you're the real Messiah, why don't you come down? There's no such thing as a Messiah that comes with a cross. But Jesus stares the shadow in the face. And at a cost we will never understand, not for all of eternity, he says, no. I will suffer. I will take all the shadow of the dark human race upon myself. I will go to the cross. I will drink the cup to its last drop. And as he does that for us, he says, not my will, Father, but thine be done. You see, our little lives, our little missions, are a part of a much greater mission. They are a part of God's mission that has been sealed by something far more powerful than our skills and intelligence. And that's part of what's going on behind the scenes in this book of Esther. You see, Esther's all about God's divine mission being accomplished. In this story, there is a law that is unalterable, and there is a wheel that will not be turned. But it's not the law of the Medes and the Persians. Think about it. I love this. How is it that of all the women in the empire that a Jewish girl named Esther becomes queen? How is it that of all the people in the empire that Mordecai should be the one who saves the king from an assassination plot? How is it that